Good morning, everybody, and welcome along to the Blood Red Liverpool Transfer Daily with myself, Patrick Smith, as we bring you the latest LFC transfer news and rumours. Well, joining me today is Dave Comerford from Liverpool.com. Dave, how you doing?
Not too bad, Patrick.
Good stuff, good stuff. Good to have you here. Well, so we've got two main talking points today after PSG have reportedly put Gini Wijnaldum up for sale, as he's been left out of their pre-season plans a year after signing him on a free from Liverpool, while Napoli defender Kalidou Koulibaly, who's definitely a regular in the Reds gossip columns, should we say, over the past 5 or 6 years, is set to seal a £33 million move to Chelsea. Dave, let's start with Gini. It's been a nightmare move for him, hasn't it? Pochettino, clearly not a fan, sort of let him rot away on the sidelines, if you like, last year. Now, Christophe Galtier, new coach, has arrived, and it still looks like Gini's not going to be given a chance, is it, as they look to sell him on?
Well, yeah, I mean, when the change of manager happened, Wijnaldum was probably thinking, right, I've got an opportunity now to kind of, I was going to say relaunch his PSG career, but in a way it's just kind of launch it in the first place, really, given how it's gone for him up to this point. So he probably looked at that as an opportunity, but obviously, with these rumours that have emerged now, it seems like Galtier just doesn't really see him as someone who's going to be part of his plans. So I think what we have to kind of bear in mind here is, so Wijnaldum's chosen to join PSG, first of all. So he kind of, perhaps that was a mistake on his part. So, he's not blameless in the situation, but it's used as part of a narrative, really, that the grass isn't always greener. And, Coutinho's brought into it. And to a degree, that's true. And leaving Liverpool, a lot of the time hasn't maybe brought the results that players wanted. And we'll see, obviously, what happens with Sadio Mane now. But I think there's kind of more to it than that on kind of like a nuanced level, because you got to think about the circumstances they're walking into, really. And Wijnaldum is going into a team which looked, in terms of kind of its playing staff, that it could compete for the Champions League and might be one of the strongest in Europe. But he's essentially moved from this Liverpool system where everything is so kind of in harmony, really, on and off the pitch. And you go to PSG where there's kind of, it seems, too much kind of ego within that dressing room for everyone to be pushed in the same direction. And I think it's particularly hard on the midfielders, probably, in terms of kind of the defensive work they have to get through, because they don't really get any protection from the attacking players. And that's obviously something Wijnaldum would have been used to at Liverpool. So hasn't really worked out from that point of view. And I think the circumstances as well, with Pochettino, feeling the pressure, battling to save his job unsuccessfully. And, the fans appear to kind of be at odds with the team. This whole like environment, footballing, and just terms of like atmosphere wise around the club, I don't think it's necessarily conducive to being a success. So I think there are mitigating circumstances there for Wijnaldum. But at the same time, it's not hard to imagine that he regrets leaving Liverpool. But then again, we don't know what kind of contract offers are on the table and whether they were kind of actually suitable for a player like him.
I think it's really interesting because we've seen so many players leave Liverpool, and I'd say a good 90% of them over the past 5, 6, or 7 years have struggled once they've left Liverpool. Do you think it's more a case of that for Wijnaldum struggling to adapt to a new system, or do you think it's the difficulty of joining PSG? Because you said there's such a, I don't want to use the word egotistical, but it does come into your head. It's a team of individuals. It's a completely different ideology and coaching system. And, do you think it's more a problem with Gini, or do you think it's more a problem with PSG? Because we know the talent that Gini has.
Well, I think that it's kind of a combination of everything you just said. I mean, I think Get French Football News, which I think is like quite a popular platform for Liga, and they tweeted something recently about Wijnaldum being like the flop of the year. And when you see that, you're like, well, maybe he himself recognizes that his performances are not up to scratch. And it's not just a case of the environment not being right, like I said earlier. So he probably could have played better, and maybe within a system that isn't Liverpool's, he doesn't excel as much, and that can happen. But I mean, when we talk about systems, I think, do PSG almost actually have one in a way? Like, it's really hard to like pin down. It's when you watch them, and certainly the consensus seems to be that you've got really a collection of stars, but there hasn't really been like an identity imposed on them. Obviously trying to, be like really ambitious when they play and stuff, but that idea doesn't really seem to be there, or at least the buy-in certainly hasn't been from, like, obviously, some of the players. So it's difficult to judge it on a systemic level. So I think it's a combination of everything, and the environment, like I said, as well, because I think it would have been better for Wijnaldum to go. I believe he could have played for another top club in Europe, but maybe a team. I mean, another team I think was Barcelona, which probably would have gone wrong as well when you look at how things have kind of, or certainly in the first half of last season, how things went for them. So really, I think if you're going to leave Liverpool, you need to make sure you're moving somewhere that is, more settled to a degree. And with Mane, it's interesting because I think Bayern are on a different level in terms of how effective their kind of operation is, probably in a footballing sense, than than PSG and Barca. But it's still not perfect. I mean, you've got a really good coach there, and I think you will have everyone buying into the philosophy, unlike maybe at PSG. And the question then is whether this kind of crippling almost obsession with winning the Champions League is an issue for them as well, because you see Bayern really win the Bundesliga and then the fans aren't happy because they've not done themselves justice in Europe. So, there's a lot of pressure in that environment as well. Like, and maybe it's almost like an unhealthy pressure in a way. So it does sort of make you realise how everything is kind of lined up at Liverpool, and you've got all really the important ingredients in place, and maybe only when the players leave do they actually realise that.
Yeah, those obsessions are unhealthy, aren't they? I'd love to have it at Liverpool that I won. Just us with the title and being annoyed that we didn't win the Champions League. That'd be a nice position to be in, wouldn't it? Yeah, PSG is just a club sort of conducive to failure, isn't it? Pochettino, one of the greatest, a brilliant coach with Spurs, did so well with them, accumulated so many points over his period there. It's just mad that it's not worked out. I think PSG just is that rotten club. But is there a case for Gini Wijnaldum to return to Liverpool? We've got a few comments in the section here. We got them pretty much every sort of Transfer Daily morning stream we do. There's calls for us to sign midfielders. Is there any case for Liverpool to get Wijnaldum back in, maybe even on a 1-year loan deal, as he's rumoured to be up for sale for?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think Liverpool will do it. I don't think Klopp's the kind of guy who would ever kind of go back, in a sense. But me personally, I'm actually like strongly in favour of it in a way, and it is because I think we do need another midfielder. And Wijnaldum, I think he's already proven that he can be obviously a success within the system. And I think there were games last year where we maybe missed the kind of stability that he provided for us in midfield. And we also know that he's bulletproof as well, in terms of, he literally never gets injured. So I think I don't see an argument for not doing it in a way. Like, I don't, because he's obviously was maybe disappointed with how it was handled in terms of the high levels of the club when he left, but he's not necessarily someone who's going to cause any sort of issues, like character-wise. I don't think so. Yeah, this is the thing. When it gets raised, like, I don't necessarily see it as realistic, but I also don't see it as something that's particularly like problematic. To be honest, as an idea, like maybe bringing Felipe Coutinho back would have been. I think this is kind of more clear-cut and actually potentially being sensible, to be fair.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Personally, I think I'd probably take Gini back in the same sense that it just makes sense, doesn't it? He could slot straight back in, quick, easy cover, and then even if, ideally, let's say we sign Bellingham and then he joins next summer, that'd be my dream scenario. Get Wijnaldum in for a year just to cover that role. But Dave, we're going to move on to the other side of the Transfer Daily today with Kalidou Koulibaly. He's moved to Chelsea. It's been a terrible window, let's be honest, for Chelsea so far. Seemingly half their squad have left on freeze. But how good a signing is Koulibaly? Obviously, he's been rumoured with Liverpool for years, hasn't he?
Yeah, so I was actually wrote about this transfer yesterday. And one of the most interesting things I kind of found out was that when we were looking at centre-backs as potential, when we needed really that marquee centre-back signing, and we ended up getting Van Dijk, one of the players who was sort of second or third on our shortlist was Koulibaly. So if we hadn't been able to sort of repair relations with Southampton in the way we did, then maybe, we could have been talking about a kind of version of events where, he's the man we build our defense around. But I think the thing is, obviously it was 2017 when we went for Van Dijk. So Koulibaly then was in his mid-20s. I think he was 26. And he's kind of the prime age, really, in terms of the types of players Liverpool would sign. Now he's just turned 31. And don't get me wrong, I think he is probably one of the best centre-backs kind of in Europe, really. I think he's almost been someone who's underrated in a way in terms of not really figuring in the conversation. That's probably to do with the fact that he hasn't maybe got the massive move that everyone was expecting. And the thing with that is, I assume now that move wasn't going to happen because of the age he was at. So the fact that it is a little bit surprising to me. And I think that shows that maybe it isn't the wisest investment in terms of giving a 5-year deal to someone who is 31. And don't get me wrong, he'll certainly give them 2 or 3 years of like an elite service. But I prefer signings like Konate, for example, who, yes, he's not at the level originally, but he can certainly reach that level and stay there for a long period of time. And certainly in terms of the actual player himself, we obviously played Napoli like 4 times in 2 years. I think there was a couple of friendlies thrown in there as well. And the moment everyone remembers it is Salah kind of getting the better of Koulibaly for that famous goal in 2018. But I actually thought on kind of the balance of the whole duel, that Koulibaly actually played very well against Salah, especially in the games that were at Napoli Stadium. I thought he kind of was able to lock him down quite effectively, and that just showed how good he was. And obviously he's captained Senegal, I think, to AFCON earlier this year. So yeah, he's a top player, and it's an important area of weakness to address for Chelsea. But yeah, just not necessarily maybe the most kind of long-term investment.
Yeah, it's a very Chelsea style, isn't it? Just signing a player in their prime for now. I suppose because Tuchel knows if he doesn't do well next year, he's probably going to be looking at getting sacked because that's the way that Chelsea goes. But, last year, Chelsea were heavy title favourites. A lot of people even put them above Liverpool as favourites for the title, strangely, with all those hilarious lists at the start of last season. They've really dropped off now, though, Dave, haven't they? Is Koulibaly anything of a boost to them back towards being title contenders, or do you think they're still a little bit off Liverpool and City?
Well, obviously, you have to bear in mind that they've lost Rudiger and Christensen, and Rudiger, after kind of people couldn't really work out how good he was, I don't think, for the first sort of part of his Premier League career. And then really Tuchel comes in and he looks like one of the best centre-backs in the league, really, from that point on, certainly top 5 in terms of his performance levels. So it's a tough act to follow in that respect, but I think you can definitely make the case that Koulibaly is the same level as Rudiger, and maybe a tiny bit better. So it's good from that point of view. I think they're looking at other centre backs as well, like Ake and Kimpembe. So they'll be looking to kind of fill out kind of the depth in that position. So we'll see how they do with that. In terms of Chelsea as like a title contender, you got to bear in mind with those obviously predictions, you were coming off the back of Chelsea winning the Champions League and kind of more investments in the team last summer. So it kind of felt natural, especially given how good they've been kind of the second half of that season under Tuchel, kind of felt natural that they would contend. And up until, I was looking at this yesterday as well, like up until really the start of December, Chelsea looked like they could potentially be title favourites. But there's, I think, 2 things really. They had injuries. Chilwell, for example, was a big blow, losing him, I think, for the rest of the season. And then there was also an element of they'd almost gone a year without any sort of sustained bad run under Tuchel, and it was kind of crazy, to be fair. But then when it did arrive, they maybe didn't respond necessarily well to that, and you always knew it was going to come, and it was a question of how quickly they could sort of get it together, and they kind of didn't, and then it unraveled towards the end of the season. So I see it right now as it being Liverpool and City again. I think Tottenham are dangerous as well, based on the business they've done. But Chelsea are operating on a different timescale with their summer window. As you mentioned there, it seemed like it had been going terribly because of all the players they were losing, not really getting anyone in. So we'll see now, obviously Sterling arriving as well. We'll see now what they can do in terms of incomings and what the squad might look like for the start of the season. And obviously you can make a judgment then, but yeah, they'll probably have to do, a fair bit more kind of business before they can really challenge Liverpool and City, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's a smart couple of signings from Chelsea, but I think they do need one or two more to get back into that question of Liverpool and City. Spurs as well, looking very decent, good momentum. But Dave, we're going to have to leave it there. That is all we've got time for today. Thank you very much for joining me. And thank you to all of you for watching along as well. Be sure to keep your eyes peeled on the Blood Red channel today as Liverpool have touched down in Singapore ahead of their friendly tomorrow with Crystal Palace. So we're bringing you content such as Jurgen Klopp's press conference and, of course, plenty of Darwin Núñez and Fabio Carvalho content. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled. But for myself, Patrick Smith, and Dave Comerford, thank you for your time and your company. And it's goodbye for now.